Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012 show episode review. This one's going to be for Season 3, Episode 18, The Deadly Venom. And yeah, this was a pretty good episode. While last week was kind of bad, and the show hasn't been great for a while, this was kind of a return to form. I don't think it was an amazing episode, but it was a big improvement over a lot of the episodes from this season. And the big thing, most notable thing, was that one, they got back to the main plot. That was big. Two, they had some continuity between other episodes, with Splinter's injury kind of continuing into this episode. And three, most importantly, I think, this show had character development in this episode with Splinter, with Leo, a little bit with Karai, and stuff like that. That's kind of what this show needed to do. So definitely, if they have a run of episodes kind of like this, and that, like, as I said, it still wasn't the greatest episode. I have some issues with it, but a run of like 5 or 6 episodes, like basically if the rest of the season kind of feels like this episode, I think we're in for a pretty exciting kind of ending to the season, definitely. But the problem is kind of what I expected going into this episode, is that we've had so many episodes like this before, where it's just basically it's the mind control plot. Okay, this time it's a little bit differently in that the villain is the one being mind controlled, but even that they've kind of done before. And then they did the thing where, gradually the turtles are kind of taken out one by the villain until only one or two of them remain. Thankfully, it worked well in this episode because it linked into this really interesting arc they kind of had going on with Leo and Splinter. Really cool kind of one-on-one training session as you kind of see Splinter suffering from the aftermath of the previous episode. The episode before that one. You see him suffering from that. Leo kind of beats him in the sparring session, and then Splinter reveals this kind of healing hands kind of ninja technique that he has. He teaches it to Leo, and the episode is primarily about that, given that Karai is all about poisoning people, and it gave a lot of opportunity to do that. And it was really cool to see that more kind of spiritual, almost magical side to being a ninja. Definitely some nice kind of, not references to Naruto, but just in terms of another show that has kind of ninjas performing almost magical arts using hand signs. This was a really cool thing to see, using the kind of signs with the various names. A lot of really good animation on just the movement of the hands, which is really impressive. Yeah, we saw that. We saw Splinter then reveal that he has this other mantra, I think he called it, where he can actually remove poison. And Leo kind of more or less kind of learned how to do it himself without kind of directly being taught it, which was definitely interesting, where you had that scene where Splinter was healing April and then Leo was healing himself in the middle of the fight. And I think what was really impressive about this episode is that they really, like, for possibly like the first time in the entire series, made it really feel like Leo, this one turtle, really accomplished something in this episode. That his brothers actively praised him for what he did in this episode. Basically taking their enemies on one, learning this technique, showing that he's a leader, showing that he's learned from his kind of basically suffering of being injured, and now showing that he has this ability to become a really good healer. That he's not just this really good guy at combat, that he has this other thing if the need comes down to it. Because I'd almost expect that they'd maybe give Donnie or something like that the healing, if that had to be a power that you distributed to one of the turtles, that you'd give it to Donnie, who's probably the least effective in battle. But instead you give it to arguably the most effective one, which I think works because he is the leader, and he is the one who knows the kind of ninja techniques the most, is the most like Splinter, just normally. So I really like that. The really strong relationship between Splinter and Leonardo came across very well in this episode. What else? Karai herself, because she was under mind control, there wasn't a lot to her character because it wasn't her. It was mind control. And it was cool to see her techniques now that Stockman had changed her back into primarily human form, so she basically has control over her like shape shifting powers and can transform parts of her body into snakes and apparently like control snakes and kind of generate them almost. There was some really interesting stuff with just what her powers are like right now. I also really liked basically Casey meeting Karai for the first time. Uh, Basically, their first real interactions on screen. I like that. Even though it wasn't really her, again, as I said before, he just knew that she was kind of on their side now, but hasn't properly been introduced to her. I like the kind of flirting fight that they kind of had together, and then the chaos that turned out to be another just way to poison him was nice, and that kind of took Casey out of the episode, but it was nice that they got that introduction out of the way. What else? I think the disappointment of the episode is definitely just that the overall idea of the episode. The kind of good guy is mind controlled and attacks the other good guys and almost takes them out. Wasn't the best, and then the episode felt like it just kind of the plot ended really suddenly. That oh, Leo has just kind of basically healed himself. He's fighting back against Karai. I want to save you, Karai. He looks away for a second, looks around, she's gone. It was like, oh, I thought you were going to do something really interesting here going forward, but no, you're continuing this thing on. And I think it's definitely a case of just that because this show hasn't been massively plot focused of late, that I want this episode, which is kind of plot focused, to do a lot, and it just kind of stops short of doing that. Hopefully, it rolls directly into the next episode, and we really get them addressing something of what's going on. But I have a bad feeling the show's going to do what it usually does and just kind of have this really one-off episode. Final thing I'll say is just that, despite this being a really strong Leonardo episode, and he's my favorite turtle, it really highlighted that it really highlighted how worried I kind of am with Mikey as a character, in that unless he's like the focus of an episode, the only thing they seem to be able to do with him is have him be an idiot, have him just be the joke in every single scene. It gets really it's starting to get really tiring that that's all he is. That because he's the least serious one, it always is some sort of comedy thing. And the idea of like one scene early on in this episode was that he was frustrating Donnie and Raph, who were watching this really intense fight between Leo and Splinter. And I really didn't like how the writers wrote him in a way where he was the only one who couldn't see that this was really important. That they just went with it and went with it. And I don't know what the point of the scene really was. Maybe it's setting up that Mikey's going to suddenly become serious of late, but it's a really minor thing to mention in the episode, but it just really struck me that just all of the other turtles were relatively serious in this episode and understood what was going on, and Mikey was just an absolute idiot, basically. And I usually don't mind that too much, because I, at a base level, like Mikey's character, but here it was just kind of a little bit like, you don't fit in this episode. And that's a bit of a problem, because I think even despite like obviously his kind of weird antics and stuff like that, this should have been a moment where he realized to just stop talking and just watch. And to me, that would have got across some nice character development for him, that he could see that. I don't know what they're going to do with him. I'm just a little bit worried for him because Donnie has a serious side with the science. Raph has a serious side as well. Mikey, I'm just a little bit struggling with, unless they do something with him. But other than that, pretty solid episode. I actually really enjoyed this one with where it went. I just hope the show continues the little bit of form that it has found. So that's the end of the review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. Other than that, thanks for watching, and bye.